Hey guys, Julian from synthwavepro.com. Thanks so much for joining me today in this Synthwave tutorial. We are actually going to be synthesizing a pretty cool bass patch that one of the patrons had asked me to synthesize and basically show them how I managed to create this cool sound. So let me play this in context and we can dive in deeper. I also have a little surprise for you at the end of this tutorial. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the patch we are going to be creating. I'll give you a bit of context. All right, easy peasy. It's a nice sort of gated bass sound. It's really driving and somewhat energetic, but yet cool and laid back at the same time. We'll be using Serum for this particular tutorial. If you are using another synth like Diva or Massive or Silent, you can gladly hop on and follow. It's all fundamental. All right, so let's go ahead and start. And also for you FL users, this is very much applicable. Please consider following along. So I'm going to go ahead and create a MIDI channel here. I'm going to call this top bass tutorial. And the reason why I call this top bass is because this bass complex really is made up of two sounds. So we have the one that we are going to be synthesizing, which is this guy here. Right. And we also have a sub. All right, let me pull up the sub real quick to show you guys what it looks like. We have essentially a square wave or a pulse width modulation. It's really set to a wider square wave here, and we're using this particular square wave or waveform to sort of ground our sound. So when you want to create a nice sort of rich bass sound, you want to use waveforms such as the sine or perhaps a square wave, which is exactly what we have going on here. All right, so our mid-range bass, let's go ahead and focus on this. So this is going to be where we are going to be creating that patch. I'm just going to use this MIDI data. I'm going to consolidate the clip, call this top bass tutorial, and maybe color code this. And what I want to do next is simply bring in an instance of Serum right over here. And this is what it sounds like. All right, I'm just going to lower the volume a bit. So if you pull yours up and it doesn't have this waveform by default, the way you get to it is you click on the default here button. It opens up the menu, make your way to analog and then select the basic shapes options here. And now you can toggle throughout this menu and you have a bunch of waveforms. Okay, I'm going to settle on the sawtooth here. It's option number 2 and it's essentially the same sound. Okay. Nothing too special. The first thing I want to do here is make a duplicate of this oscillator A. I want this to be right over here. I'm just going to go ahead and do it the quick and dirty way, which is to head on over to the menu and toggle down to copy oscillator A to oscillator B. And now we have it set right over here. I'm going to make sure that this is engaged. It is by default, but there's a little bug here in the GUI interface here. All right, so now we have two oscillators which are basically outputting the same waveform. It's just a little louder, probably 6 dB louder. Anyways, the next thing I want to do here is engage our filter. Make sure that the slope is set to 12 dB slope. We have a few to choose from, but select the 12 dB per slope. And we are also going to be routing our oscillator B to this filter. So they're both outputting into this filter. Okay. So you may ask, why do we have two oscillators outputting the same signal? We can just, have one and bump up the volume. What we want to do next is the reason why we want two oscillators. And we are going to be adjusting some of the sort of tuning of both of these oscillators to make them sound a little more complex and to give it a little more life. So let's turn our attention to oscillator A and focus on the fine control here. I'm going to lower this by roughly 9 cents. Okay, so we are pitching it down ever so slightly. That's for oscillator A. As for oscillator B, we'll be doing the same, but in the reverse direction. I want to pitch this up for 9 cents. All right, so +9 on oscillator B and -9 for oscillator A. Let's play in here what this sounds like. I'm going to crank up the cutoff filter here so we can hear what's going on in the higher frequency range. Notice the smearing, the pulsating sound. That's what we want. All right, so that flanging, slightly chorusing is achieved by detuning one oscillator by a certain amount and, doing the same thing for the other side. One thing you want to do when you are doing this is to make sure that you're keeping the values the same for both oscillators. All right, so if you decide to detune both of your oscillators, you want to make sure that both of the values are identical. So if I decide to keep this at let's say -6 on the oscillator A, I also want to make sure that I am at +6 for my oscillator B and vice versa, okay? You'll find that the more they are detuned, the more pulsing or smearing the effect is, the more sort of prominent that effect is. So I want it to be a little more prominent, so I'm just going to go ahead and bump this to -9 for oscillator A and then +9 for oscillator B. Cool. If I were to exaggerate this, let's just have some fun here. Let's say I put oscillator A to -18 and then oscillator B to +18. Let's check out this sound. All right, to me, that's a little aggressive, okay? This is why I want it to be set to roughly -9 and then +9, all right? I'm also going to lower our cutoff filter. We don't need all of that stuff at the upper register. Okay, this should be fine. Now, it sounds very different from our original patch. Cool, so we still have our work cut out for us. All right, so the next thing I want to do is focus on LFO number 1. Now, as I mentioned in the previous tutorial, the LFOs really just affect a parameter, okay? So we are going to attach LFO number 1 to our filter cutoff like this, and we have it set to a unidirectional format here, and this is what it sounds like. All right, so you can hear that it's opening and closing our filter, but the rate is a lot slower than our original patch. So we have to come in here and adjust the rate. That's from quarter notes to eighth notes and now 16th notes. Cool. Next thing I want to do is adjust the shape of the LFO. I'm just going to slide this breakpoint here to the very beginning. So now we have our LFO sweeping through the frequency spectrum here. So we're starting pretty high and then we are sort of coming down, which is why we get that gated sound. One thing I want to do is adjust the envelope amount of this cutoff filter. I don't think we need all of these higher frequencies. So I'm just going to come in here and lower this a little. There we go. So it's not opening up to the point where we're getting all the 10K, the 15K, the 18K. We don't need all of those higher frequencies. This is, after all, a bass signal. And in this song, we have a lot of stuff going on in the higher frequency range, so we don't need the bass to be interfering with that stuff. So now it sounds a lot warmer. It should slide into our mix very easily. Okay. Before we proceed, let's go ahead and set this to mono, and that's basically playing one note. So we can't play two notes, and that's what you sort of want for your bass signals. Now let's play and see what this sounds like in context. I'm just going to disable our original patch, and let's go ahead and play this. Cool, sounding really cool. One thing I would like to do here is perhaps manipulate this LFO curve here, and you'll see what it sounds like as I sort of manipulate this curve. So nice and tight. This is a cool way of adding some variety to the overall sound of this patch. Right? So let's play this in context. As it's playing, I'll just come in here and tweak this curve. Tight. right, so this is a really cool trick because throughout the piece, instead of having this just chomped down at the same rate, it sounds pretty boring. I'd rather us come in here and manipulate this curve. All right, so this is what it sounds like if we do nothing and we just leave it as is. Very static, very lifeless. But we can come in here and just manipulate the curve. Now, some of you might be asking, is this an automatable feature? And I think it's not, but what you can do is very quickly create an audio channel, which would in turn listen to this MIDI channel, and then you can hit the record button. And as you're manipulating this curve, you have it recorded. So you can actually use this in your own production, all right? That's one little hack, if you will. Another thing I would do to sort of give it a little more power here is to click on the sub, lower this by 1 octave, and select the square wave here, and also route it to our filter, and this is what we have. So let's A/B this. This isn't bad, but I think this sounds a lot better. We are introducing another oscillator here, 1 octave lower, and if you select this square wave, it's adding quite a bit of aggression and power to the sound. Okay, so let's A/B this. Okay, let's play this in context. All right, so really simple stuff here. I wouldn't go ahead and add any more effects. You can, of course, you can always add some distortion, maybe some chorusing. But the cool thing with this smearing technique here, this is really a takeaway that you guys should, apply to your own production, is that when you have this form of smearing, it almost gives the impression that you're widening your sound, but really we're still outputting a mono signal. This is right down the middle. There's no left or right information. There's no side information here. Everything is in the middle, but just because we've added this sort of detuning, it does sort of give us the impression that we are sort of widening our sound. Now, you can always come in here and add a delay or a chorus, but I think the sound sounds very grounded, and that's what we want for this particular sound, okay? All right, so if you like the sounds of this particular production and you want to use them in your own, you can always go ahead and subscribe to the Patreon. I will be giving away all of the sounds here. All of the sounds were created in Serum, so you can go ahead. They're all royalty free. Have a blast. If you want to reverse engineer them, go ahead and do so. I think I have about 5 or 6 different patches that I used to create this sort of landscape, if you will. So this one we've just created. I'll show you that's pretty basic. We also have a cool sounding sub. Cool, and we also have some stabs right over here. Okay, we also have some melodic elements. Sort of like a pad sound, a nice sort of retro sounding instrument. We also have some pads. Sort of a nice smoky sounding pad over here. We also have some plucks. A lot of effects for this guy over here. And we have some cool sounding synths. I also include some layers here that you can use that sort of add a little sheen to the sound. All right, so this was a quick tutorial, nothing too complicated. I just wanted to share this technique with you guys and also give you the chance to download some of these presets that you can use in your own production. Thank you to my Patreon subscriber who sent me a request to, share this particular piece. I know I sometimes whiz by a lot of these tutorials, but I wanted to dive in deeper with this one. And hey, share some of the techniques, right? The more we learn, the more we grow the community, the Synthwave community. Had a lot of fun working on this little guy here. And if you haven't done so already, if you are new here, welcome to the channel. I'm Julian. I run synthwavepro. Have a bunch of masterclasses that perhaps you might be interested in taking. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel. And if you're not, and you've seen a lot of these tutorials, well, I thank you for your support. And go ahead and click that notification button. With that said, guys, stay safe, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.